Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Witchcraft and Voodoo with me, Lilith Dorsey, and my co-presenter, Sable Aradia. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good, Lilith. I'm sorry for the delay here. We just got set up, family stuff, but we're here. Yay!
All right, fantastic. I'm so excited tonight. We're going to talk about initiation, and I had a lot of questions from people who saw the past episodes, and they were very excited about what we do in our tradition and also what you do in your tradition with initiation. So I'm going to let you start. Haha.
You started. Yeah, put me on the spot. That's great. No, that's cool. Okay. Well, as most people probably know,
Talk about
um,
initiation, and I had a lot of questions from people who saw the past episodes.
oh, it appears we have a bit of a delay here.
I know. That's really weird.
Okay. Has it settled?
All right. I think we're okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll run with it then. Okay, so as most people probably know, the Wiccan traditions that have an initiation project or process usually have three degrees that you initiate into, although that does vary. Some traditions which draw more influence from what we would know as traditional witchcraft, Robert Cochrane and all that sort of their group, right? They use two levels of initiation. And I've heard that there's different levels of initiation depending on if you're a fairy initiate or not. I don't know the specifics of that because I'm not a fairy initiate, so that would be up to them to describe. Some eclectic covens nowadays like to have a sort of a fourth level of initiation as well, because 3 degrees don't mean what they used to, right? Like when Gardner and Alexanders and all of them were doing their thing, generally you had to have the first degree initiation before they would even take you into the circle, right? Because now you've had the initiation, so you can see the secret rites, right? So that was your basic beginner level stuff, right? And third degree too has grown in terms of what it means to initiate to that level, right? It used to be that you needed less, right? Then you need to know less than you currently do, right? I think, like I've seen, it looks to me that way, and from what I've heard from other people, it seems that way. I've certainly seen changes, so fair enough. Okay, so understanding all of that, right? My tradition is, it comes from, as I've said, the All-Guard line, which is kind of a mishmash of the Alexandrians and the Gardnerians who decided that they wanted to kind of bring the craft together. And, they came up with their own thing. And of course, it didn't actually bring the craft together. It just created something new. And then these guys, the line that I come from, went and started mingling stuff with, I seem to be doing something weird there. The picture's slow or something, but you still hearing me?
Yeah, I'm still hearing you.
Okay. All right. Well, then, fair enough. Then it doesn't matter what the picture looks like.
Yeah, you seem a little frozen.
All right. Okay, I see what's going on here. Just a moment. Hello? Okay, there we go. So, all right, so yeah, it was my fault. I was having an error on my side of things, and I figured it out. Okay, so right, so
Yeah.
these All-Guard initiates, right? They got together and they started incorporating some of the North American craft elements that they'd encountered, right? So mostly West Coast influence, because what is Star Sapphire came from Vancouver, right? Vancouver, British Columbia. So I'm in the interior of BC, so it makes sense that, you know, it made it that far. Although we've got some people in Toronto now and some people in Manitoba, and, you know. Okay, so at any rate, they incorporated a lot of eclectic stuff on purpose, right? And some of the more feminist witchcraft stuff that was going on, you know, reclaiming influence and whatnot, right? And so it incorporated a little bit of that. Okay, so in our tradition, right, we actually do sort of have 4 degrees. There's like you do a basic Wicca 101 course kind of idea, and then if you decide you'd like to study further, you become a dedicant, right? And this is kind of what first degree used to represent in the craft, right? So you would come and you know, learn more about the craft and then grow from there. Now, how I like to describe the different degrees to people when I'm explaining it, there's a couple of different metaphors I use. And one, at first degree, you know that Wicca is your path and you'd really like to devote yourself to learning more about it and doing it. Right? At second degree, you should know the craft well enough to teach it. And at third degree, you should know the craft well enough to, you know, be expanding on the theology, doing some really serious mystical work, you know, that kind of thing. You can start your own coven when you're second degree, but you're, I mean, like, I know it sounds, you know, people say, oh, well, no, but you can. You just have to, you're generally kind of looked over by a third degree who kind of oversees things, right? And then, but at third degree, you can found your own covens. You're under nobody's authority, you know, do whatever you like, with the exception of we give weight to the elders of our tradition, and there's something called the Lady of the Star, which is sort of the senior high priestess, and her only power is the ability to say no, right? If someone
That's
says,
great.
well, I can like it, right? I think it's kind of a neat idea, right? So, yeah, no, she can say, no, we're not going to do that as part of our tradition. If you want to do that, go ahead, right? You know, nobody commands witches, right? But, okay, so that's that process, right? The symbolism, right? First degree is all about birth. Second degree is all about death. And third degree is about love and sex. But, right? So I'm not going to go into tradition oath-bound material about what specifically we do, okay, but there's more than enough information out there about the basic stuff that tends to happen in Wiccan initiations. I mean, like, everyone's like, oh, it's this big secret. No, the little specifics are big secrets. What actually happens, it's out there. It's all on the internet, right? Like, there's no big secret, right? Like, we tend to be very traditional, right? In that we do bind and blindfold for our first degree, and, you know, we tend to do our initiation skyclad by preference, although that's not a requirement in our tradition. We encourage it, but we do not require it. And that's, for those who might not know, naked. Right? Our third degree initiation involves what we call Great Rite, which is a symbolic coupling of priest and priestess, or priest and priest, or priestess and priestess, whatever. We're not really, you know, gender binary in our tradition. Others are. And it can be done either as a symbolic gesture, or you can draw the deities into yourself and then actually experience a sexual rite representing the deities, right? And that's, again, not something we require, but we do encourage it. Right? So, yeah, that's, I guess, a basic overview. I realize I've been talking for quite some time. I cannot wait to hear what you have to say. I'm very curious, so I'm really excited to hear it.
Well, I mean, it's such a huge topic, and there's so many things. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are common to all the traditions that I practice, which I've mentioned before in our talks, is Lukumi, which is also more commonly known as Santeria, New Orleans Voodoo, Haitian Voodoo. They all start out with what I consider an initiation, but some people don't, but with a head washing, or in Spanish, it's a rogacion, or in, Haiti, it's a lave tete. Basically, you're washing your head off. It's a baptism, so you're getting cleansed. And that's really the first steps. Why I think of it as an initiation is because it's like the first steps where you're recognized in the tradition. You don't really have to promise anything. You don't have to do anything, but it's like the Orisha and the Loa don't even see you until you've been cleansed off in this way. And then you're sort of under their protection, and you can. It's funny. I did an initiation head washing for someone not that long ago, and she said afterwards that it was like a clarity came through. And that's really what it is. It's sort of a refining of the energies that are out there. So you're not just, getting a bunch of bazillion spiritual inputs all at once. And then, you're cleansed off and you're clean and things can come to you clearer. So that's really the first thing that I think anybody does. And then there's a lot of differences as you move forward. In Lukumi, usually what would happen first is you get a set of alikes, and geez, I got to get up. I have to get up so I can show you alikes. All right, I'm getting them.
Okay, no, that's cool. Fair enough.
I'm like, wait a minute, I have to go get a prop. Okay, so basically what these are is, everybody's like, oh, pretty necklaces. I'm going to start by saying, don't touch them. Like, if you see them on somebody's neck, don't touch them, because there's a lot of, they're blessed and they're fed, and there's a lot of things that go into them, sort of, being part of the initiation. And this is really what you get. Normally, this is only 4 here, but usually you get a set of 6 or 7, depending on your house, depending on what you're going to get. But then this represents a blessing from each of the particular Orisha. You usually get Elegua, you usually get Obatala, which is, again, more clarity. Oshun, Yemaya are usually in the mix. Shango is very often in the mix. I know a lot of people have heard of some of these deities or work with some of these deities. So when you get your alikes, they come on. Sometimes it depends again on your house. Sometimes there's an Oya. There's a certain order in which you have to put them on. Also, sometimes there's an Ogun. These are not always given at the first thing. There can be later initiations where you have to get those received. So, and basically now this is like you can communicate with them. That it's that, it's not that they're just, they notice you. They actually maybe might hear or help out in a situation. So, and these are worn usually at all times except when you're menstruating or when you're having sex. So you would take them off for that. But it's, like I said, it's an initiation. You get fed, you have to wear your whites, you have to have your head covered. There's all these, feast foods have to go out, and prayers and all these things have to be said. So that's done. Then as you go down the road, there's a warrior initiation. Sometimes that's given at the same time that the alikes are given. And you get, again, I'm still talking about Lukumi, but you would get your warriors, which are most commonly known as Osun, which is different than Oshun, even though it's spelled very similarly. But Osun is a rooster that's there for warning. Again, it's not really thought of as an Orisha. It's just an element of protection that comes to you. And that's a challenging one because it has little bells hanging off of it. And if the bells start ringing, then danger is near. There's a whole story that goes with it and everything like that. But usually what we do, because you don't want the bells to ring all the time, so we pack them in cotton and things like that. And then you have to be very careful the cat doesn't knock it over and stuff like that. Because if the cat knocks it over or something like that, then it has to be rewashed, refed. And by fed, I'm talking about, animal sacrifice, determined by readings and other things like that. So it's a big deal. It's not like, oh, I can just, sprinkle something on it and we're done. No, serious stuff has to happen. And at the same time as you get the Osun, you also get your Elegua and your Ogun and your Ochosi go into a pot together. So this again is another element of protection. I think the reason that they come first, or in conjunction with the first real initiations that someone takes, is because protection is so important. So we hold that up. And also Elegua is the guardian of the crossroads. So you're going to have the initiation that deals with him in the beginning. So that makes sense So I don't go on for another 20 minutes. I'll move into how it's different. In Haitian Voodoo, usually the first thing you would do, again, it would be the lave tete, and then you would have a coucher, which would be sort of I guess the easiest way to describe it is it's a multi-day ritual where coucher is kind of like a nap or a rest. So it's a multi-day ritual where your body and your mind and your spirit is sort of put to rest. And during that time, people pray over you and they feed you the proper foods for whatever loa or orisha that you're connecting to during this coucher. And then afterwards you emerge. And then there's other rituals that go into it. And then I think the first thing that usually happens after that coucher is you go into a Kanzo, which is a fire initiation. And after you get the Kanzo, again, it's similar to the other traditions that I mentioned, but you're able to really do things. It's like you're a recognized member of the spiritual house. And I think that's one of the things that people get wrong about initiation. For me, anyway, I got another question tonight about somebody wanted to learn about the tradition. And to me, there really isn't any separate learning about the tradition from initiation. You know, you can't really separate those two. It's not that, I mean, you can study, but studying is only going to take you so far. Your individual experience is your individual experience. And that has to be learned through initiation. I mean, everybody's process of initiation is difficult and beautiful and wonderful and hysterical and all of those things rolled into one, but it's their own process, and that's their learning experience that they have to bring into it. New Orleans Voodoo is really, it's been changing a lot in the past 20 years that I've been involved in it. In my house, we do sort of like, after those early initiations in Haitian Voodoo and Lukumi, usually what happens is there's more specialized initiations come on, whereas everybody in the house is supposed to receive this particular loa or orisha, so certain ceremonies will be done and everybody will go because it's just a year that's going to be filled with things that have to do with that loa or orisha, you know what I mean? It could be something like Ogun because there's going to be a lot of surgeries, or there's going to be a lot of car accidents, or there's going to be a lot of, you know, military violence or things like that, so everybody would need that extra protection of Ogun, so we would go in. And again, it could be an alike, it could be, you know, sometimes we call them soperas, where they're like big bowls and dishes with, you put the ritual stuff in them and then you feed that, you know, as a representation of the god or goddess or the loa or orisha. So that's the short version, but we also don't have an end to our initiations. I mean, they're individualized, so some people are going to have, you know, I have friends that have 30 alikes and others that only have 7. So it's all individualized to the person. And, you know, if you continue in the tradition, just by the nature of things, you're going to need different things. You're going to need more stuff to get more powerful. And we operate as a hierarchy within each house, but I know you're talking about hierarchy, but each house is autonomous. So even though recently in Haiti, they have elected a high supreme leader of voodoo, they only did it 6 months ago, Max Beauvoir, and then he died, and then they elected somebody else, and he had a car accident and ran off the road. So now they're in the process of electing a third person in the past 7 months for this. But that was more of a, they even said it was more of a public face. So
I might almost consider that a sign to not do that.
right? I know. 3 supreme leaders in what, 7, 8 months? It's a lot.
Right. Of course, you know, there's no supreme leader of witchcraft or Wicca, right? So
There's people that want to call themselves that.
I know, it's funny. So funny.
I know a lot of them, yeah.
Yeah, like you're ever going to tell witches what to do. It's just not going to work very well. They don't like to be told what to do when they're just initiates, just starting out. I don't know.
It's true, and it only gets worse.
That's true. Yeah. I've got so much that I want to talk about based on, you know, I was listening and I'm like making notes as I'm listening. Because I'm like, oh, this is stuff we can talk about together. This is cool. Okay, so the first thing, the lave tete, right? Head washing, right? That's actually something I didn't occur to me to mention, but of course, when you do a serious ritual, right? Of course, initiations being a very serious ritual, right? It's significant, right? You would generally do a ritual cleansing process. We would take a ritual bath. You know, there's anointing. There's, you know, all this kind of stuff. So that whole idea of cleansing and clarifying, right? Totally. Absolutely. We have, there's that common element. And I wonder, I don't know, but I wonder if that's a common thing when one is initiating into any priesthood, basically. I imagine when you start, even as an acolyte of whatever religion you're getting into, there's always that cleansing and clarifying process. The Christians, they have their baptism, right? And that's a variation of that. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. And then you're talking about, I forget the name of the beads. The beads were...
Oh, the Eliques.
The Eliques, right? Okay, so in Wicca, when you take your first degree, not at a dedicant level. A dedicant level, if you do that, is just generally an oath that you're taking, right? A public oath where you're like, okay, I'm sworn to learn about the craft, and I'm going to listen to the goddess and the god, and I'm going to try to, as I see them, or the gods and goddesses, right? Because again, we have a lot of different ideas about deity, and they're all correct in Wicca, right? There's no, this is the right way to interpret it, and that's the wrong way to interpret it. There's lots of variation. But, okay, so, yeah, it's that statement that you're going to, take it seriously and make a serious study of it, right? That's dedicant, right? And it's important, right? It's important to do that. But, it's you haven't really committed to anything other than checking it out yet, right? Okay, so at the first, I'll come back to that, but at the first degree initiation, right, you do in what is called taking your measure, right? And this is, you take a cord, right? And the cord is tied at certain places that basically represent various, sections of the body, right? And the idea is sort of, it's a poppet almost. It represents you, right? And this is your measure, right? And then it's a ritual thing that they say, in the old days, we would keep your measures so that if you ever acted against the coven or the craft, we could use it against you. But in this time, since you came in perfect love and perfect trust, we return your measure to you, right?
Oh.
So I kind of like the symbolism of that, and then
That's
that meant, you didn't, this is, it's, I guess, I don't know, I really like it because it has that whole, okay, we trust you, right? And it's also, your measure is a very interesting thing. You keep bringing it back with you when you get different initiations. It goes through it with you, right? The symbolic magic is really interesting. I'd really like to discuss that sometime too, but I have used my measure in some two really important spells in my life. So, okay, and then the other thing is, I was curious. Oh, we're frozen here. I'm hoping you're still seeing me, but...
yeah, I'm still seeing you.
Okay, good. Your picture just froze for a minute. Okay, so you take them off when you're menstruating or during sex. I'm curious of knowing what the spiritual significance of that is. What does that mean? Why do you do that?
Well, there's a long explanation for it. Those are, it goes along with, I always offend people saying this because I think that similar ideas have been perpetuated by a paternal, evil oligarchy. So, but there's ideas for the menstruation time is supposed to be a time where women are so powerful that they're not supposed to attach themselves to other magics. There's a story about Oshun going off into the woods with a group of very powerful women, which are referred to as the witches, and they tried to take over the world, and because they were on their moon time, they were capable of doing it, and she had to convince them in the end that it wasn't really the right thing to do, and she gave them honey and danced, and then they all went off and had a party. But it's that time is supposed to be like separate and powerful and for regeneration of yourself at that moment. And sex is like your energy is going to someone else, so you have to. And both of those times, in order to get clean afterwards, you're supposed to take a shower or bathe in running water.
I get it. Okay, that actually makes perfect sense to me. It's okay, the menstruation thing. That's really interesting. because, okay, yeah, I realize that it's got this, patriarchy reputation.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think that's probably the Aboriginal influence, right? The North American Aboriginal influence. I guess that, and this is a guess, this is not an educated opinion, I don't have any facts or studies, but I'm wondering if this is the thing. I know that there are a lot of First Nations traditions where that is part of the tradition. Like I went to this medicine wheel ceremony, and that was part of what was going on. So one of my friends who was menstruating at the time was not able to participate in some of the activities, right? And voodoo, of course, is influenced by First Nations traditions, and North American witchcraft is influenced by First Nations traditions. Feminist witchcraft, Dianic witchcraft, some elements of it also have that tradition for the same reasons you mentioned, because women are considered to be especially powerful during their moon time, right? So it's to be used as a time of, rest, regeneration, perhaps, psychic visions and dreams, but not a lot of, out into the world forward magics, right? Which
Right.
makes sense. And as for the sex link, that makes sense to me. If you're having sex with someone, then you are, of course, connecting with them energetically as well as physically. And whatever deities or orisha that you're working with, right, may not want to connect to that person that way,
Yeah.
right? So it's sort of
Yeah.
like a respectful closing the door, I guess, while you're, screwing in the next room, I suppose, in a manner of speaking.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to cover our shrines and altars and things like that if they're in the same room when we're having sex. I remember once I was trying to have sex, and my Elegua was in a closet that had louver doors, and there was no sex going to be happening. It was like that wasn't good enough because he could see out the little teeny spaces in the closet. Oh, yeah. That was entertaining. But yeah, no, I mean, it's just a respectful thing. I mean, I say to people, would you have sex if your grandma was sitting right there? No, you wouldn't, probably. I put probably out there because some people, who knows, but for the most part, like that's not something they would do in front of grandma or the queen or the president or whatever. So they should treat their divinities respectfully since it's already built in part of the religion. There is something in Haitian Vodou where you can do a spirit marriage. It doesn't actually involve actual sex though, but you agree to marry yourself to that loa for either a certain amount of time, like a year, or for every Thursday. And some people even like go through the whole marriage ceremony and build a separate bedroom and sleep in there and all of that.
That's really kind of interesting. Now that also has overlaps, right?
Yeah.
It's happening more in the polytheist community. I'm sure you've heard about it by now. God spousery is, generally the idea that someone is, in a marital kind of relationship with a deity. And
No, I haven't heard of this. This sounds entertaining.
oh, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like it's weird because I kind of get it, right? For me, when I first did a ritual where I connected with a variation of one of the gods of Wicca, Herne, right, who's one of the horn gods of Wicca, right?
Right.
I really made a connection, right? And I don't feel like there's a marriage per se, but there's certainly a long-term committed relationship, if you know what I'm saying, right? I feel like he looks out for me. Occasionally he intervenes in my life. I'm very committed to him, right? And I really feel a sense of, that same kind of spousal, I love you and I desire you, and, I want to help you, and, all that stuff, right? So, I get it. Some people go much deeper, right? Like there's people who are really, their life is absolutely dedicated to this one deity that they are in a marital relationship with, and they have conversations, and they, like they'll do things like they'll be driving and they believe that their deities will talk to them by doing things like, switching the song and the playlist to something that's relevant to the conversation. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. I have.
I have actually. I have a friend of mine who's a professor who was going to do a workshop on like radio and television divination, like if this shows up, this means this, So yeah, I have come across that, but I've never come across this marriage. This is interesting to me.
I spend a lot of time on WordPress, or at least I used to. So this is where, and I made some real connections with people who are God spouses. So, I was very curious and interested. Now, okay, now this is not something that is a standard part of Wicca. I'd like to clarify that, but it is something that comes up a lot in traditional witchcraft. And since I'm both a witch and a Wiccan, it's worth mentioning, right? But I want to clarify. But it's like, I get that, right?
Yeah.
In Wicca, we're less concerned about, it depends on the deity in terms of response to the sex, right? Some deities you don't have that kind of relationship with. Some deities it is like your grandmother, Others are, like most of the deities of Wicca that really involve themselves generally present as very sex positive. So to some degree, it can even be a sacred thing that you're doing as a ritual offering of the sexual energy, right, to a deity that you're working with. But I would caution about doing that with a partner unless the partner is also, realizing what's going on and willing to do that.
Yeah.
What if people not doing that? And I'm like, that's not fair. You're fantasizing about another guy while you're with, or whatever, right? Like it's.
I like that. No, now I feel like I presented us as prudes. I mean, there's certainly legions of my deities that enjoy having sex. And, if you've got a ritual where the Baron and the Gay Day are there, that's a very lusty, lewd time where people are, bumping and grinding and grabbing people's parts and stuff like that. So there's definitely manifestations that have that in there. But again, like you said, if it's two people, or more, doing something for each other, then that's one thing. If it's something that's supposed to be something else, we try and keep it in a very different context.
Right. I think that makes sense. Yeah, that's very sensible. Okay, yes, another thing, right. Another thing I wanted to talk about that you had mentioned was everybody's got their own individual experience, right? And the initiations don't ever stop, right? Okay, I believe that the formal initiations do stop in Wicca, but there are all kinds of what I would call initiatory experiences that really, they bring you through a threshold and they change you, right? And those changes are very significant, and hopefully you learn something from them. And often I find that in the process of study, right, when someone does set their foot on a pagan path, sooner or later, these things are going to happen to them when they're ready for it. And it might happen in a tradition, or they might just have the experience because the deities have decided it's time and you need this lesson, right? And then it just happens. And, either that or you're ready and, if you believe it's all, archetypes and how you relate to your subconscious, which is perfectly legitimate, then it's a matter of you come to that place where you can have that revelation by the process of the study and the training and the teaching, right? So I would also say it's very experiential, right? Okay, there's a lot of stuff that goes around about what is legitimate, right? What's a legitimate witch? What's legitimate Wicca? What is witchcraft? What, who's allowed to use what word, right? I think it's a bunch of horse shit. It's all a bunch of horse shit. Here's the thing, okay? In my opinion, Wicca is the religion. If you're practicing the religion, you're a Wiccan. Not everybody has to initiate, right? This is not needed. If you're, let's consider people, like if you're going to church, right? Most people just go to church and they try to live a good, if they're Christians, they try to live a good Christian life and they try to, and that's it, right? And that's good enough. And that's most of us. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But we've got this idea that everybody's got to be a priest or a priestess. And we get it from the early books on Wicca, right? Gardner and Valiente, and but see, that's not what I meant, right? If you read Witchcraft Today, right, which is the first nonfiction witchcraft, modern witchcraft book, right, that was out there, right? Gardner says that he believed, and there's all kinds of evidence to indicate that he was mistaken, but he believed that the Wiccans, the witches, right, that he called the Wicca, were maintaining the old initiatory mystery cults of the ancient world, stuff like the cult of Isis and the Eleusinian mysteries and all that sort of thing. And that they had, of course, adapted it to work with the European deities where they were, right? And so there was a time when there were a whole bunch of people who just believed in those religions. And the idea was the Wicca were a secret priesthood that eventually there would be a time when they could be priests and priestesses again, because other people who were not priests and priestesses would come, right, who would want that kind of role, right? And I think we're in it, I think we're here. This doesn't mean that, anybody can stand as your relationship with the gods is personal, right? So nobody can tell you that your experience is wrong or stand as authority, right? And not in that respect, in terms of your spiritual experience. It's your individual. But the rules of being initiated are you're taking it seriously, and it's a calling to a priesthood, right? So if you're not interested in being a priest, that's okay. And if you want to be like an acolyte in the priesthood, and you don't want to be like responsible for a bunch of other stuff, that's okay. It's not merit badges, and people treat it like that. They're like, oh, I've got to get my second degree because otherwise I'm not as good as the person who has the second degree, and that's crap. Okay, so anyway, I'm off my soapbox now. But since we were talking about initiation, it was important to bring that up. Right? I thought.
No, I think that, and I think especially there's a lot of dilettantism going on where people feel like they need to initiate in a bunch of different things. I mean, I know I have different initiations, but they all sort of, well, I mean, I've been at it a long time, number one. And number two, they all sort of evolved organically. Like I said, I'm not one of these people that changes houses every 5 minutes. I belong to the same houses I've been at forever, But I do appreciate your point about not everybody needs to be a Santero or a priest or a priestess. I think that we have that problem as well, that everybody wants to, whatever, put on the whatever and run the show. And I don't understand why. I mean, my godmother in Santeria used to say to me, she won't initiate anybody until they absolutely don't want it anymore. Because they know what it entails. They know how much work it is. They know how much responsibility it is. They know that, I mean, you've got to answer the phone if it's somebody's freaking out. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big responsibility to have the, weight of the community on you like that. I
agree. There is a lot, right? Like, if you're going to take on that, and you're going to take on these initiations, you're going to become a high priestess or high priest, right? You're the one that's cleaning up the meeting place after everyone else has left, and it's 2:00 in the morning, and you have to work at 8, right? You're the one that has to answer the phone at 2:00 in the morning when somebody says, I'm like having, there's demons in my room or whatever, like,
yes.
And you don't get the no option. It's your responsibility. You have to do it, right? Everybody else can go, oh, I'm feeling sick, I'm taking the day off. You can't. You've got to just suck it up, right? So if you're not prepared to do that, don't do it. And, and don't worry about doing it. Everyone sees this as this big prestige thing. Oh, the high priestess or whatever. You know what? It's totally not that at all, right?
No.
It's totally not that, right? It's about more often than it brings more trouble, right? Than prestige, right? If you think it's about prestige, then so does everyone else, right? So sooner or later, you're going to say, yeah, I'm Lady Sable Aradia of the Star Sapphire tradition. And someone's going to say, oh, lady, huh? Oh, high and mighty, huh? Well, I'm just going to like completely ignore everything you say for no other reason than I just think you're hoity-toity. And, yeah. So, right?
No, it's totally right. I mean, we were talking a couple of weeks ago about me going to New Orleans, and there's all these pictures of me washing the stuff out of the temple after the fire. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, with my priestess standing right next to me. So there we go. You know, it's like, that's what it needs to be done. That's what needs to be done. It's certainly not all glamorous and, you know, glitter and all of that.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it looks cool when the ritual's happening, you know. But the thing about that, okay, you know, it's about, I think it's about that connection, right? Having that moment of divine connection, having that feeling like we are more than this and there is something else, and we are, you know, for one moment we have the honor and the privilege of touching that and then showing it to other people so they can touch it too. That's what I think it's all about, right? And, you know, ultimately, although there's a lot of slugging, you know, right? Like they say, I don't know, I think it's a Taoist proverb, right? You know, before enlightenment, it's a Buddhist proverb. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Yeah, after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, right?
That was the caption for the picture of me washing the wood in the water.
I remember. That's right. That's why I was sticking in my head recently, because I saw your picture. Absolutely.
I'm like, yeah, I guess there's nothing to do about it. All right,
wow.
So what are we going to talk about?
I don't know. We seem to have talked quite a lot already. I'm sure that there's quite a lot more that we could both get into, but I think we should probably wind it towards a close. I'll throw in, if somebody wants to know more about the specifics of Wiccan initiation, you can look it up online, right? There's all kinds of information. I recommend sacredtext.com, sacred-text.com. You can go there to the neo-paganism section. It has an internet, it's Aidan Kelly's compilation of Gardner's original Book of Shadows, both the original and the 1950s edition, right? So you can look it up for yourself. It's all there. You know, different traditions will have their own oath-bound material that will not be there, but you'll get the idea. I wrote a couple articles about it. I wrote one called The 3 Degrees of Wicca, which I would just search for it with my name, Sable Aradia, right? Because going through Pathos back channels to find it, because it was on the Agora blog before I had my own blog, is a headache. Don't bother. Google's better. Do it that way if you want to find it. And did I have anything else about that? No, I don't think I had anything else about it, initiation specifically, but that in that article I examined the whole birth, death, and love metaphor. So if people are interested in that, it's there. And do you have any material you want to point people to?
Well, I think I gave people an overview of what they could expect. I did do a piece on my blog, Voodoo Universe, on Pathos, about how to choose your godparents, because really, you're going to find a house, you're going to be initiating with these people, and it's going to be what they say to you, and you know, what you have to do from there on in. So this is a list of questions and things you should discuss with them and things you should think about it going into it, because you're really, you know, you're trusting these people with your spiritual life, you know, and it could be that it's your physical life too, because if you get sick, who are you going to call? You're going to call your godparents and say, please pray to me. So it's very important. So, you know, don't just rush into it, and make sure you really trust these people. So there's some stuff there about that, I think. And there's stuff in my book too, Voodoo and Afro-Caribbean paganism, about all the different levels of initiation. So
great. Yay.
All right, so we're going to do it
again. Sure are. 2 weeks. So what day is that? That's that'd be the 25th of April.
Okay.
So same bat time, same bat channel.
yeah, no, your channel. It's going to be on your channel.
Yeah. I don't know what our topic's going to be yet. We have not discussed this, so.
No, it'll be a surprise.
If anybody has any thoughts about what they'd like to see, feel free to put it in the comments section in the video, or if you've seen our trailer, there is a quiz on the trailer as one of the little cards that comes up near the end of the video. So, yeah, you know, let us know.
Nice. All right, thanks everybody. Good talking to you again, Sable. This is a lot of fun.
This is always awesome. Have a great day, Lilith, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right, bye.